Gentlemen, welcome back to the shop today. Treat Especial. Had so much fun here in the Dungeon of Doom where tools go in, but they never come out. I really enjoyed taking this apart. Gleefully, the 8-year-old boy inside me, rekindling the joy of taking things apart. Unfortunately, now that we're older, we got to get them back together, but allowances must be made. We're going to have a look at the cheaper version of the 3.8, and this is non-fuel version. Got a different head on her, and maybe not as skookum. I think there might have been some knee-jerkery going on. I'm a little slow, I'll grant you that. I got broad shoulders. But I'm starting to cotton to the notion what these marketing wanketeers are up to on account of seeing this here tool, Bear tool, for 159 Canadian kopecks at the local homeless death spot. So I got to thinking, well, the thing is I also need the baterias. So I picked up 2 of these little tiny batteries, 99 doll hairs. And then I got looking around for other sundries. I found this tucked in the corner on Especial, 159 bucks for the tool with a battery and a charger. You see what they're doing? They're trying to move everybody away from pneumatic tools and from other kinds, plug-in tools, to these battery tools because the margins on the batteries are fucking bananas. 3 18650 lithium cells in there cost you 50 bucks for one of these batteries. The margins. Sorry, where was I? Can we start the count again? The margins got me excited like a Silicon Valley venture capitalist running a marathon 2 inches at a time. Those fucking profit margins. Jeezless. 3 batteries cost you 50 bones. It even got you a nice little case here that you can fumble with when you actually need the tool. And that's an odd thing to do, ship the tool with the battery installated, because when it's one would think that the confuser in there is always taking a micro dose of power. Let's see how much voltage is sitting in here. Okay, we'll put the meter here in DC volts. A little bit. There we go. And there's a whole bunch of ports on this battery, but if you look at the tool here, it's easier to see on this dingle arm. There's but 3 ports. So what are these additional ports doing? So here we got power in C1, C3, T. That's temperature port. That's feeding back into the confuser in here. Shuts her down if the battery gets too hot. There'd be a little thermistor in there. And these are balancing, and they only come into play when you put it on the charger. So because we have 3 batteries in seriesed up, so the voltages add. The problem is if one battery gets a little out of balance, say it's at 1.5 volts and the other battery is at 1.25 volt, then something bad happens to the batteries. They blow up. So what they do is they have these balancing so that they can balance all the voltages through all the cells, so the cells last longer, don't burn your hacienda down. Now this is the new battery right out of the package. And what I'm worried about is the voltage in transit dropping down below the threshold for damage to the batteries. Of course, these batteries, they like to stay, and I thought they should be charged fully up from the factory, but no, it's better to leave these slightly discharged sitting at a lower voltage, makes the battery last longer. So when you're using these, if you can, never run them all the way down, because your battery will last a lot longer if you're only using that window between full charge and say a half charge. They'll last way far longer. You get way more chooch for your chotch. Of course, nobody tells you that because they want you to buy more batteries. Well, that's interesting. Not in a good way. Let's see. Check the connections. Yeah, we're there. We're there that way. Here's a slightly used-itter one. You never know if your test setup is correct. And yes, I am going from side to side. Makes you feel like you're right here in the shop looking over my shoulder, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Oh, bonk. Okay, 12 volts on the old one. If you're astute, you'll note kind of pussyfooting around like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs because I don't want to fry my... There's a lot of angry pixies held up in that receptacle. There we go. Okay, so it must have just been something wrong with the connection there. We're way down at 10.5 volts. So I put her on the charger, 10.5 volts divided by 3.5 volts per cell. We're nowhere near any kind of threshold where we're going to damage the battery. So that was a red herring. Now, quite about a bit, the bigger on the gland end in the fuel style. The 3/8 pintle hitch here is the same in the half as the 3/8. So this, all they do in the fuel for making the 1/2 inch or 3/8, they just put in a different anvil. It's the same tool, however, roughly equivalent tool. They say that it's got different torque, so maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. But it's definitely the same size casting and head. Pretty big gland end. You're trying to fit it in, squeeze it into a dirty, tight, dark little corner. The 3/8 here, very much slimmer. You fit a lot more places. You would want to have this quite a bit longer, I think. I think that'd help you out. So if I'm not mistaken, they are coming out, Milwaukee are coming out with quite a bit longer ratchet with the slim head. But you see a knee-jerk reaction quite clearly is that they must have been blowing through these heads like clockwork, warrantying them, and then they went overboard and overbuilt the ever-living shit out of this one. The non-fuel version, that means it's not a brushless DC motor. It's just a brushed DC motor. We'll see it momentarily, more than likely Mabuchi. Say got the same paddle switch, exact same component, exact same anemic little pin what'll break off and leave you in the lurch, just peasant le piton instead. The guys are saying, got back to me, thank you very much. The guys using these steady. That does break quite often. And also the way the battery arrangement is, it gets loose in the hips and the battery turns, because you want a little extra jam. What are you going to do? You're going to refund the battery. Of course you are. In addition to the small head being better, but well, there is no kill like overkill. But at the same time, the tool's kind of useless if it doesn't fit in the hole. So you're going to have some instances, especially automotive guys. I mean, they pretty much got to be triple jointed 90-pound Filipino dudes to work on some of that stuff. I had a story time. Acquaintance of mine, automotive mechanic, fighting the good fight, not at the dealership, mind, but one of these mom and pop shops. Take care of you and try not to rip you off for generations to come. He's get one of these diseases from Detroit City or from Busan, something. So that's the thing. Works on all kinds of vehicles, all creeds and colors of vehicles. Okay, got to change the camshaft in one of these little diseases. Book rate 80, or rather, shop rate is different than the book time. 4.5 hours to do this job. Okay, so he gets in there kind of humming and hawing, and well, there ain't nothing for it. It takes all the plastic bits off and so forth. And a couple hours in, well, ain't nothing for it. We gotta pull the engine. I mean, what else are you gonna do? Pulls the engine, he's into this fucking thing for 18 hours. We can't charge the customer 18 hours because the book says it's 4.5. What the fuck over? So calls this dealership, yada, 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 give him the runaround, yada, yada, yada. Eventually gets on the horn talking to a dealership mechanic. He says, yeah, what you got to do is buy the special tool. Special tool, he says. How the fuck is that gonna peel 14 hours off the job? This is ridiculous. No. You'll see. Buy the special tool. He buys the special tool. Comes all wrapped up nice. It's a little hole saw. A hole saw. What the fuck is a hole saw I got to do? Got a hole saw and a little instruction sheet, a rubber plug. Transverse engine, you go in, you take the tire off through the wheel well, you get your hole saw, you cut a hole in the wheel well, you pull the camshaft out through the wheel well and stick in the rubber plug. Bob's your auntie, what, 4.5 hours. Again, juxtaposing. I guess that wouldn't be a juxtaposition because they're comparing the two. Again, the fuel versus the non-fuel. The fasteners got Loctite on them, but they're the factory Loctite that's applied to the screw. It's like that paste, what doesn't go everywhere. A fellow was telling me that Loctite is actually real hard on thermoset plastics or thermoplastics, and you're not supposed to have any kind of additional schmoo on there leaking into the plastic because it weakens it. It makes it more brittle. And we saw on this guy, there was all kinds of additional schmoo on there. No anti-tamper torques in the non-fuel little guy version, whereas the big guy does have anti-tamper torques just to keep the non-determined scumbags out. Looking at it very closely, however, these are nice fucking drums in the deep. The internal, where you can see the internal organs are shrouded, so you can't get anything directly in there. Another fella commented down below me in the doobly-doo that indeed these guys break off, these fins break off the fuel and get jammed in there and fetched up. You got to take it all apart because they're not shielded. They're not shrouded. There's a direct egress and entrance into there for schmoo, ball bearings, and pokey bits. Interestingly, even for such a small motor, we still see a motor control board, not epoxy potted, conformally coated, but it's got through-hole components here, MOSFETs, probably totem pole configuration, sticking out of the board, and there's your abatement for heat, or your heat dissipation. You can see the mold itself. Of course, glass fiber reinforced 30%. That is not a part number. Somebody said I ought to put that on a t-shirt. And TPS and SEBS overmolding, styrene with butyl rubber on the outside, and thermoset, this goop. So this is a two-part mold, and we can see that it is indeed an older mold. It's not waldered right out, but you can see some artifacts here of it just being used, contrary to the fuel version, which at this point in time has a fresh injection mold. A little bit of weirdness here going on where the battery goes in. Some hand working has gone into repairing that mold. Having a gander now at the Dancing Pixie Path. This is interesting. This is going to be good because there's going to be a clear delineation of value engineering. This is quite a bit older here. January 12, 2013 was the last time this iterated. And the control, it doesn't have the three-phase control for the brushless DC motor, but it does have what I initially thought was two MOSFETs in totem pole configuration. It's not. It's even cheaper than that. MOSFETs are expensive little buggers. So what we have is an international rectum fryer MOSFET. And then we have a no-name. Let me see if you can get right in there and see that. You see that little symbol there? That's just a diode. And a corollary to that is there's only 2 pins. So that is a diode. What for? Snubbing the inductive kickback when you turn it off. Of course, you got all these pixies dancing around, high amp, well, maybe 5 or 10 amps going in here at 12 volts, and you stop that dead. You get water hammer, essentially, like the pipes in your house clanging, only in the pixie paths. You don't like that. These guys, it limits their lifetime. So they add a snubber diode, and that allows that inductive feedback kick to dissipate nicely. But we're just using the one MOSFET, kind of a, I'm not an electronical engineer, but I would say that is a definite cost savings there at the expense of longevity. However, on the obverse of that, they are using a name brand switch, which in the new fuel version, they are using a straight up Chinesium guy. Now, this is a Chinesium switch, but at least it's branded Marquardt. And you see different bushing on there. That's it looks like a UHMW bush or a high density polyethylene bush. Maybe a little bit more translucent. It's probably high density polyethylene. So recycled milk jugs. But at the same time, that's good and lubricitous. Still, no bellows on there, what for keeping the conductive dust out. So chances are when this fails, I would say you get a 200-pound gorilla reefing on here, you're going to blow the head of her clean out. But this is kind of more of a tool you use for speed, not for power. For the motor fixation, you see that? Tried to jump out and kill me. This guy, the fuel, had 4 fasteners. In this case, we have 1 pin holding the works together. Now, nothing wrong with a nice strong pin. It can't back out. Once it's in there and it's affixed by the casement, it ain't coming out of there. So nothing wrong with a proper pinned joint. The drive is interesting here. We got a, looks like a kind of Legend of Zelda Triforce drive. Just getting into the head of her, I would recommend, as guys were saying, after some use, this thing cocks up in either the forward or the reverse. I would suggest to you that that's just the pawls, either some schmoo or a busted crest of a gear tooth got in there sidewards and cocked up the works. For the sake of taking out a Jesus clip and just putting her in neutral, pull that out. Avoid a trip to the homeless death spot or wherever your warranty thing is, because save yourself some money. How are you going to save yourself on warranty? Well, you never go in there and just get the warranty. You always got to buy something. It's like going into the rape wagon, or rather, that's from a bygone age. The Snap-on van. I'm just about paid off my first Ratchet, what I bought 20 years ago. Only got 4 more $49 payments. And she's, whoa, there's some weird shit in there. Look at this. So we got a forged piece here. Forging steel is the strongest. You know, it's just, you're never going to get a powdered sintered metal gear or any kind of component as strong as forged. Forged is just skookumer as frig. But we do have some powdered. The pawls here are powdered. And you can see they've pre-rounded off those crests. So they've mitigated that hitting the crest off and then having that chunk of schmoo rattling around in there. These little guys are just plungers on springs to preload this to keep it from rattling around. Now, you look at the one thing I do not like is how teeny tiny the change is for forward to reverse. But what are you going to do? This is just, have a look at this. It's incredible the difference between the fuel and the non-fuel version. The non-fuel version is a completely different tool. Light duty. It's got a smaller head. Necessarily, all the components got to be smaller, but these are downright anemic. I would guess that they've been blowing these clean to kingdom come. It's almost as though you'd want to run one fuel version for the 1/2-inch drive. Now, this is my opinion. And then you'd want the smaller 3/8 drive for lighter duty stuff, because it just ain't going to last. I just calved out this little, I'm not, okay, so that is steel. It's quite light, thin cross-section, so it's difficult to say if it's, not difficult, but I wasn't sure if it was steel or aluminum. Luckily, it is steel, just black and gun black there. But she calved this out, plopped right out, and you see what's going to fail. That little itty-bitty titty pin there, when you reef on this is holding back the works. You're going to shear that pin clean out of there. You probably do that. You could do it out of the package, right, on a heavy bolt if you wanted to. So that is clearly why they've gone to the skookumer head, because I'd be willing to bet you they took a bath on warranties on these. And the motor, I was mistaken. Well, I guessed wrong, rather. Not a Bambuchi, but just a off-the-shelf Chinesium one. Straight fan blades, little oil light bushing / bearing on the backside. Interesting gear train arrangement. You saw on the fuel, we were driving from the sun gear. And in this case, we are driving on the planet carrier. You see the planet carrier. The sun gear is in there just to keep the planets in place, but it's actually driving, if I can turn it, maybe if I get this little guy, it's actually driving on the planet carrier. Yeah, you see that? Now, why for would you drive on the planet carrier? Well, that has to do with the characteristics of the motorb. Brushed DC motor, not nearly the torque of a brushless DC motor. So what we do, if you look here, I'm turning the thing, the sun gear is turning much, much quicker than the planet carrier. What's that mean? It means you get way more torque out of the planet carrier. So instead of having multiple stages and driving out of the sun gear, which you would see on like a drill, you'd see multiple stages. What they're doing is they're not cheating, but they're just being smart about it. They're running off the planet carrier, which turns at a lower speed, which means you get more torque. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. We haven't had a real good look at ratchets. You know, we've had a real good look on this channel at the grinders together and the impact guns. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into these if you'd like me to do a truck brand, say a FAP-off or a Mac or something like that. Matco, we ain't got Matco here in Canada, so that ain't going to happen. But maybe a Snap-on, have a look at it. As well, we're going to test the ever-living shit out of these, make a jig and so forth. But clearly, even though the embodiment looks the same, two entirely different tools. One reasonably skookum. I called it reasonably skookum. We're going to test that out though. And this one, don't let your granny reef on it too hard because this will break before her hip does. Thanks for watching. Keep your dick in a vice.